clarifications?
Okay, so to replace 145 Park, we would have to, this is one scenario, you'd have to increase the density on 105 and 91 Park Lane to 30 units to the acre and convert the two Park Place properties to residential only at 26 units to the acre to replace 145 Park. So, as compared to where we were, where we started out at 26 DU to the acre on the Park Lane properties and 20 DU to the acre mixed use on Park Place. So that's the change.
So, John, with that change, in regards to stories, so at 30 units per the acre, based on these parcel sizes, how many stories are you thinking?
You're looking at 3 to 4, I would suspect.
Okay, so then at 20,
maybe you could fit it all in 3, but it depends how much space you want, right? How boxy you make it versus going up.
Okay, so if we do 26 units, we would stay within 3 stories, have some space for landscaping, things like that. And then, okay, and so then with the 25 and 41 Park Place, I mean, these parcels are much smaller. So if you're looking at 26 units per the acre, how many stories are we looking at these two parcels, approximately?
Any of these kind of densities are really not, 3-story is probably a pretty decent number for planning purposes. At this sort of spitballing planning purpose, yeah, we're talking about 3 stories.
Okay, and then 3 stories, and then I'm just thinking of the footprint too of the building as it relates to the parcel size. So not only we have to go up, but we'd have to expand out.
Well, yeah, you're getting back to product type, and are these 1 bedrooms or 2, and there's a lot. It's hard to take sort of these raw density numbers and translate them onto a footprint, because you do have to get into the idea of what are you providing in terms of the product that you're studios. 2 bedrooms, a very different kind of floor plate requirements. So, but you're right. The more you spread out, the less room you'll have for surface amenities on the site. The lower you keep it, the more likely you have to have potentially surface parking, right, as opposed to tuck under parking. So those are all really a finer level of design that would have to be looked at. You have a series of variables, and you squeeze the box this way, and it's going to go up. You push it down, it's going to go out.
Yeah.
And that sort of sweet spot, I can't tell you sitting here, the precise differences between 26 to 30 on this kind of footprint or that footprint. It's, it's in that ballpark of 3 to 4, very easily accommodated. The 20s you could do in a 2 to 3. And I think we have actually some visual examples in town of different densities and how the buildings look. Just we had that in case it came up. So.
Okay, and so the rationale, is to for these smaller parcels was to keep the units per acre at a smaller amount, so that because of the smaller footprint of the parcel.
I think part of it too was that the sites that were further back into the industrial park, if you had a little extra height, it would be less noticeable than it being sort of right on your front doorstep. So that was part of it too, was to keep the density and the scale down a little bit. Although, as Councilmember O'Connell pointed out, if you had mixed use, would you still end up with the extra bulk to accommodate the non-residential, part of the project? And that's a legitimate kind of planning concern as well.
Okay, and then with the 125 Valley Drive, so you have the 20 units per acre. By putting 125 Valley Drive into the mix, there's the potential of limiting commercial space along Bayshore because of the requirements of the units, the residential units that you'd have to build.
We would look at that I would look at that under the parent parcel, right? I wouldn't want to get into being trapped by how you arrange uses on a site, that somehow if you had what I'd call horizontal mixed use on a site that's a single parcel, I think you could still get credit for it as mixed use. So I don't think you would need to necessarily have residential on the Bayshore frontage.
Okay, so you could, potentially do 2 stories of retail, say, along Bayshore, and then bring residential to
on the Old County
Road.
frontage. Yeah.
Got it. Okay. All right. Thank you.
So, I guess I'm going to pose the question to Cliff and Lori. What do you think of this configuration yourselves?
Well, as I said before, I still think that 145 Park Lane makes sense to keep as residential because it continues the whole street, being residential, and it being located near Lippman provides a way for kids to easily get to school, and also a buffer so that people walking down Old Quarry Road Trail, during the whole trail, don't have truck traffic, fumes from any diesel vehicles that may be parked there, and there's less of a concern about kids at Lippman breathing in fumes, as I know a few years ago there was the freight forwarding business concern. So, I think that 145, because of its proximity to the school and the ball field, for a variety of reasons, makes sense to keep as residential. And, I think, as Cliff suggested, that there's ways to, to design the building so that there's a way for cars to get in to park. I mean, as long as there's a driveway to get in when it comes around the bend from Park Lane to around Park Lane, as long as there's an entrance there, I don't see that as presenting a problem. As for 125 Valley Drive, I'd like to see it as mixed use. Whether or not it has to go into the housing element, is a different story. If we don't have to put it in, I can see the benefit of having the flexibility. And on Park Place, I like the idea of keeping that as mixed use because it serves as a transition from the businesses, near City Hall, to then transition from commercial to residential by having, mixed use, and then, and then that kind of segues into the rest of Brisbane from there to the south. So, the 125 Valley, I can see us putting it in the housing element as mixed use if we need to, but I'd prefer not to. And 145, I'd like to keep as residential.
Yeah, I agree with everything that Lori said. I like keeping the option open for 125 Valley Drive, and I would hope that when after we approve the draft and then we get back the guidance from the state, during that 1 year period that we work, with the community to really come up with a smart visioning plan and hopefully a precise plan for this whole entire area. I think it provides an opportunity for us to create a blank canvas and to do it right. I think that having the flexibility for the property owner to continue to do what currently exists, but providing an opportunity to provide a greater financial incentive that then thus could potentially provide a community benefit, I think is a good win-win proposition that I think it would be good to put forward. I think having the 3 parcels, as Lori has said, being residential, I think it provides uniformity, and I like the mixed use for 25 and 41, just because it doesn't have to be a retail type of mixed use. There are lots of options available to us, and so I like keeping that option open. By doing doing something that's being proposed right now, you're increasing the density of these parcels, and I think what was presented before, provides enough density, but also doesn't overuse the capacity of the parcel. And I think what's being presented here starts to make the size of the parcel not very appropriate for the type of development that we'd want to see down there. So I would recommend just moving forward with what is on this map before us, everything that's in red.
Okay. This is the part that sucks about being mayor, Sometimes you got to make the tough decisions, Seems like this whole year has kind of been that way, but, a number of years ago, I think the last time we went through this, of course, I was on the council, and I was really reluctant about rezoning 41 and 43 and 25 to a mixed use. And the proposal for 145, 106, 105, 115, 91, and 99 was kind of on the table too. The planning commission had hit that, and it's a different planning commission. And I think, Cliff, you indicated you were on the planning commission at the time, and it was really, that one didn't resonate at all with me, because the point you brought up, Lori, about taking away income producing properties, the potential that we're tearing that fabric of what really has given us that financial base and replacing it with housing. So things change, and you got all these rules you have to follow and try and come up with these numbers, and it's kind of crazy. I mean, we have a much more reasonable number right now from a RENA standpoint, regional housing needs assessment number, than what we've had in the past, but we still have the past to deal with. So it's one of those that you kind of look at, for me to look at and go, okay, well, what happens in the future? What happens 8 years from now? Maybe a few of you will be sitting here, and a few of us won't, and got a new arena number, and all this is zoned now, and then they're going to ask for more. And then what? We're going to tear that fabric of our park up, and go after, more because we've set a precedence, or years from now, John, I know you're going to be here. No. Might be the city manager at that time, because Clay's already indicated he's not. So, it's a tough call, how to do it, because, ultimately we may be trekking back down the line if, we zone these that, okay, well, we're going to have to zone 125 Valley as housing only, you know what I mean? I'm talking about years from now. I'm just looking at the trend here that, what are we going to do, because it's going to be more. And that's really what I see what the trend is. They want more housing, and all the critical development areas, at least on the One Bay Area plan, you look at it, it's all next to the bay. It's all in areas that are going to, potentially be underwater, 50 years from now or whatever. You know what I mean? If you believe in the global climate change and sea level rise, we got a real issue that, at the time, ABAG folks didn't even want to acknowledge it. The exact word they used was hyperbole. So, it's a tough cut. I like the idea of retaining the flexibility. I agree with you, Cliff, on that, on retaining the flexibility of having the mixed use. I was really reticent about even rezoning that a number of years ago. But also, what the folks from the Urban Land Institute came up with is, how to redo the village. And Terry, I certainly agree that, we should make our retail portion or the mixed-use portion where it does face Bayshore. That makes sense, is to grasp that, because right now that it's like there's a bus stop and then it's a dead zone, and you see the back of buildings, and it's a ditch. That's Brisbane 1960. The mobile home park where our park is. I also agree with with Old County Road. That my wife tells me when she drives down that, it's like a relaxation comes over her when she looks at the park. That she's home, and it's kind of like a safety blanket. But having said all that, we have to come up with something, right? And, going there with changing this rate, I see what you're saying, but at the same time, I think years down the road, the dance we come to, we might be changing this anyway, and I'd be reluctant to change it now and see how it all unfolds. But with the same token, I don't like the idea of setting the precedence of rezoning our business park. It just, the exchange for housing is, we look at what's there now, but if you keep moving, keep growing out, and, pretty soon, we're sucking up our business park, and then, there's even some folks that say, well, we should have a residential connection to the ridge, and it's like, well, it may be, but how do we achieve that without shooting ourselves in the financial foot, so to speak, because it's a known fact that residential is a loser to a city from a service standpoint. It costs you money. But by the same token, affordable housing is just non-existent around here. And I think that we should provide affordable housing. You know, I think that should be one of our highest priorities because, you know, you look at, you know, we talk about sustainability. Is how's our next generation even going to sustain when they're not going to be able to afford it unless they're living with mom and dad or grandma and grandpa, you know, or great grandma and great, you know what I mean? It's just, you know, how, if it's not passed down, it's like, how can somebody getting out of college with, debt from going to school, you know, afford a home, or, you know, here in the Bay Area, let's say get lucky and hook up with, you know, one of these companies, you know, making $80,000 a year, and, you know, just out of school, that, you know, they did pretty well, got a good job, and get on one of the IPOs that really hit it, like Facebook or Google or something like that. But, you know, not everybody does. Those are like, you know, 2 or 3%. So, you know, I'm torn with this, but, you know, ultimately, when it comes down to, you know, I don't think I'm going to solve it right now. And I think the Planning Commission, you know, reading through their minutes, that they put a lot of time towards this, and I think I would support their proposal of this here. Reluctantly, I will support it because I think that we do have to get in on time, and I think having an 8-year pad is much better than 4. And if it matters, 145 Park Lane versus, you know, doing this, I'll trade that off. I'll trade, you know, the potential of time off with that. But there's so much there, you know, and I think our future really kind of, our downtown area really goes around this area of 41, 43, and 25 Park Place, and the Bank of America, 125 Valley Drive, and the shopping center. I think that's really a really key segment in our future planning. Maybe even for transportation too, public transportation. So I'll support the Planning Commission's recommendation on this and go with the big configuration that's shown on here. I commend my colleagues for, you know, certainly putting a lot of thought to it, but like I said, I'm definitely torn on the prospect of even rezoning. It doesn't necessarily mean that it be built, but, you know, but by the same token, I want to see some affordable housing built. I really do. I want to see something, you know, and these numbers, you know, I just got to ask a question about I don't get these numbers at all on this sheet. On this sheet, and when I say I don't get them, like, you know, 240 units at $500,000 a unit, is that considered affordable? Or what are you talking? I don't get it. I'm not following that.
That's kind of the average condo price that, you know, what is market affordable based on sales price in the locally.
Yeah, but that's not low.
No, absolutely not.
It wasn't an effort to show you low or moderate cost housing. The question was, what kind of revenue do we generate? And so that was what the point of this exercise was. What we are currently generating, what we might generate. Now, if you had lower, smaller units and more smaller valuation.
Well, I mean, what we're talking about is low, very low, and moderate income housing, right? Is what we're talking about.
We are, but again, what this whole exercise with density, you know, is a density exercise. Really, we're not designing a project, because, you know, when you you know, it's the difference between an actual project versus what this kind of numerical exercise is. They're using 20 to the acre as being kind of a benchmark of affordable. You know, we all know that density benchmark has nothing to do with the true very low mod kind of categories.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we were kind of asked to put this together at the, I think Lori had asked a couple weeks ago and Terry asked again last night. So, I mean, this is not meant to be kind of an in-depth analysis. I think if we ever get to the point where we're going to actually do a precise plan and start looking at some kind of market-based affordability, I think we're going to want to do a much more intense sort of financial analysis so we really understand those numbers. So
Yeah.
just to put it in context of what this was
Yeah.
or wasn't.
All right. Well, I think that kind of at least gives us some direction on that position, split. But
Can I,
yeah, go ahead.
can I make a comment? Because I really didn't comment on changing these parcels and deciding if, leaving out 145 and adding 125 is a good idea. I mean, if you're gonna look at that, I would say make 125 the mixed-use area. It would segue that side of the lot over towards 25 and 41, would segue into housing only instead of mixed use, but wouldn't have to have the extra parking, wouldn't have to have the extra height that's required for mixed-use units. And we could reduce the height and density with smaller units and design smaller units on all three of these properties. And if 145, 105, and 91 are all developed under the same development agreement or the same project, which is something that staff has told me would probably be a requirement, you could make sure that the back half of 145 wasn't where the high density was, or where the taller buildings and the more impact, and spread it out in an area that wouldn't have as much impact. So I think that for me, since we have the opportunity to have the 125 Valley Drive as the more viable mixed-use commercial availability, because it does have frontage traffic, or has the possibility of that, along with the Brisbane Village, you could reduce the impact and the height and the density on the Park Place units. Of course, you have to do it to meet the minimum requirements for affordability, and you wouldn't be changing the look on Old County Road as much. And you could have smaller footprint or more open space on the Park Lane properties. But what it really comes down to is, we're not looking at building affordable housing. We're looking at density numbers. And the only way to make sure we're going to build or even have the chance to build affordable housing is by limiting the unit sizes, limiting the bathrooms, limiting the parking, and making them truly efficiency, low income, or efficiency units. That's the only way to make sure that they're going to be affordable to anyone. Thinking that a condo is going to be a minimum price of $750,000 or $500,000 on top of the maintenance fees and the dues and the other things that go on. I know that during the Planning Commission discussions, some of the planning commissioners thought that the units needed to be even more dense to be able to retain any amount of affordability. And they were, I think, thought that wouldn't be acceptable either to the council or to the public. But I don't think that there's just one option. And I think that 125 Valley really should be where if we're going to be having mixed use, that's where it should be. And I don't think it should be on the other parcels.
If I may ask, if I can ask a question of staff. So John, based upon, this exercise, would a developer be required to abide by our inclusionary housing ordinance with these units? Because we're not essentially dedicating them as affordable with like a certain amount. They're basically market rate, but just smaller than what might be.
Well, I think again, and I think Councilmember O'Connell's kind of hit the nail on the head. You would take this density exercise, and then you need to translate that into codified zoning regulations, and whether those zoning regulations impose, size limitations on units and sort of in a sense, market-driven characteristics that would encourage affordability. You certainly have that right to impose that as part of your zoning restrictions. At some point, you're going to hit a tipping point of, at what point does it become marketable for somebody to actually take advantage of this zoning opportunity if indeed you've created an affordability sort of issue that doesn't pencil for someone to develop it residentially. So, I guess that's something when, you look at a more robust kind of discussion of the planning of what the form of this development needs to be or what the city's vision for it is, to the extent you're concerned about that side of it in terms of its marketability, that's something you have the right to explore as part of, that zoning district or precise plan to understand what that means.
So I understand what you're saying is that if you upzone, there's some community benefit in that you could require, and part of that could be asking the developer to build some affordable housing units. So so that's one way that we could get some truly affordable units. But so say for example, I'm just looking at so 91 through 99. So there's 49 units here if we go with 26 units per acre. So now our affordable housing ordinance says that you need to provide 1 unit for every 6. So my question is, would then the developer be required to uphold that ordinance based upon zoning it at this density?
That would be kind of the benchmark, would be the city's inclusionary requirements. The question is, as part of the precise planning, would you develop other development standards that would sort of lend themselves to affordability versus, whether it's unit size caps or whatever that would, again, promote affordability.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So I just want to get clarification that we are doing this exercise on density, but that doesn't mean that some units cannot or that wouldn't be affordable, because we do have the inclusionary housing ordinance. So some would be, and then we could. As a upzoning of the properties, like John is saying, there comes that tipping point. So you want to be working with the property owner to make sure that or to encourage them, if this is the in the precise plan that would come from the community. If you want to see that implemented, there's you have to come up with something that. It's fair to both sides, and that community benefit could be additional affordable housing units built instead of some other community benefit that we might want to see.
So you keep referring to upzoning. You're talking about allowing someone more density or coverage or less setback in exchange for
No,
something else?
no.
Or what is, what
So
are
so
you saying is
upzoning is that the property as it stands right now as a trade commercial site has a particular value, and then to rezone it to allow residential will have a different value. And I think if you put 49 units at 91 through 99 Park Lane, the value is going to go up quite a bit. Now, I don't know, I mean, throughout these numbers here, of course, is based on, say, $500,000 per unit, and that's probably not realistic. But still, there's going to be a greater value. And so by allowing a greater value for the property owner, there needs to be some community benefit for that by giving that extra value in their property. Cities do it. I mean, it's something that other cities do as well. Part of our economic development subcommittee, one of the things that we're planning to do is to visit Redwood City, and they are implementing this type of upzoning in some parts of their downtown, so that by allowing a particular parcel to have greater value, there needs to be some kind of community benefit program in place. And so part of the precise plan could incorporate community benefit as part of the precise plan. So I got that right, John? Okay.
So money coming into the city in exchange for allowing a different use?
I wouldn't say money coming into the city just you're increasing the value of the property. And if the property owner decides that they want to partake in what we are prescribing in the precise plan, there's going to be some give back to the community, some kind of community benefit that will go along with changing the current use to the mixed use or the residential. And thus, we as a community, the council, can decide what that community benefit would be. It could be expanding the park, or it could be creating, another space that could be the maker space, or another place for BDW to do their classes, or it could be providing more affordable housing units in their building. I mean, ultimately, in the end, it'll be up to us to decide how we want to zone this. But we're not there yet. We're just allocating these sites, and then.
Well, that is sort of making a decision on how we are visioning zoning them, because we've got to send it to the state and get approval. So it's not just a matter of we're not really zoning it. No, we're not quite zoning it, but we're really making it abundantly clear what the project area zoning's going to need to be to meet state requirements.
Yeah, no, we would make through the draft, we are stating that we are moving forward with rezoning these properties, and the state will give us about a year to work it out.
To implement it.
Yeah.
So, Ray, I guess that was the biggest item that you had, and you had.
Yeah, well, I'd like to, if I may, I'd just like to say a couple of things, not very lengthily because we're running out of time here. I mean, as I said at the beginning, sticking with the current configuration that the Planning Commission has come up with, I just thought we ought to think about that to make sure that that's the way we want to do it. I don't have any, strong attachments. The suggestion I had was just to get us to think about other ways of conceptualizing it, and is that better or worse? Actually, if this goes on to my second category that I mentioned earlier, that if I were to start this from scratch, I like the mixed-use idea around Old County Road, but I don't like residential into Cracker Park. I mean, I wouldn't do that at all. If I were starting from scratch, I'd look for some other places in town and other solutions. One of the properties, I know this is not going to be too well received by some people, but one of the properties that I always looked at for a long time that has potential for housing, as a matter of fact, it's allowed in the general plan, is the Levinson estate. And if you look at the open space plan, about a half of the Levinson estate is proposed for open space. The top of it, and then there's a corridor all the way down to Maine, also the marsh down there.
Greenbelt.
Right. Yeah, well, you'll remember that. And my thought was that the only way that realistically we're ever going to acquire that for open space is for us to allow some developer to do some housing development right down there at the base of Maine and Bayshore, and then they have to, to dedicate the rest of it to open space. That's how. So one of the other places that I would look at, this is not even mentioned in the whole housing element, because John mentioned it earlier, that just was sort of off the table. But I wouldn't take it off the table. I know that people have different views about it, but I'm thinking I would like to get that open space acquired, but I'm thinking the most practical way to do it is to actually allow some housing down there in the corner of Maine and Bayshore. That would generate some, I know. I asked Tim a long time ago, and Tim will remember, I'm sure, to calculate, what the potentials are at different levels of density, and actually it's quite a bit there that could be done. And that's one place, and I've already suggested in another memo that I wrote that we might want to rethink the whole way we're zoning the Brisbane acres, and that's another place. So I would have gone about it quite differently. But I don't think, it's appropriate to say, let's start all over again. I'm not suggesting that at all. I'm just giving you my views out as to how I would think about it if I were starting the process. And I had a number of other places too that I think are worth investigating. But that's just my second, long-term vision. And if in fact the property owner decides, not to do any dense residential housing here, and they might decide doesn't pencil out for them, and so 10 years from now we still have, warehouse buildings there, and okay, so then we still haven't fulfilled any kind of affordable housing objective at all. And so I'm thinking that it's more likely to get affordable housing out of properties that don't have anything on them, that are undeveloped, like the Levinson property, or like even some of the mixed-use potential there right behind the shopping. It's empty. And so you're more likely to get somebody to do something there than to tear down something that's viable. Now, if the building is old, it's torn down when it doesn't have any further functional use, but if it's generating income and they've been around for a while and the expenses aren't that great, you're not going to be in any big hurry to tear it down and build housing. So we'll see what all comes out of this, but my thought was if we're really serious, rather than just meeting some kind of statewide density gains, about actually getting some housing, then I think we'd go about it quite differently than the way this has been developed. That's my personal opinion. Thirdly, I think that, as you referred to earlier, Laurie, there are a whole lot of policies in here that I think we should look at before we send it in. There are a number of things in here that I think we ought to look at, and I don't want to run through all of them, but I just want to give an example of one that I think that's bothersome to me, and there are a number of others. And what I could do, if that's agreeable among my colleagues and the staff, is to sort of list a whole number of things that concern me, and then maybe we can, they can address how to deal with it, and we can, have a further discussion at another time. But to give an example of something that bothers me, is that one of the suggestions for coming up with funding for affordable housing is the so-called, what used to be the tax increment funds under the redevelopment agency. And the suggestion was, okay, we dedicate that to affordable housing. Well, that sounds very nice, but then if we want to develop the Baylands, it's that kind of incremental property tax that's going to help us maybe, finance infrastructure. So, you can't put everything into affordable housing because then you don't get anything. You got to have your infrastructure if you're going to have a new development like out at the Baylands. And so that's a policy that concerns me, the way it's written now. And so, and also and I mentioned, as Larry mentioned, there's a whole lot of things in here that say, oh, we're going to use housing authority funds to do this and that and the other. And then it sort of mentions, well, we got $800,000 there. Well, you won't even get the first base with $800,000 with all the stuff we mentioned that we're going to do with housing authority funds. So, and I could go on and on. There's a whole bunch of things like that concern me, that there's the implication that we really think these are good ideas by sending it in, and then we can't really change it much. So what I would like to do with your collective permission is to sort of lay out a whole bunch of those things that are in the policy section. And let the staff kind of look at them and see how they think about them. And then, have a further discussion, and then we can decide collectively, okay, you want to leave it the way it is,
Well,
or you want to
perhaps what
change
we
it
do
or
is
what?
have everybody send in their concerns, because
Oh, we
we're
could
kind
do
of,
that too, yeah, sure.
yeah, because we're in a time constraint
Exactly.
here, as I'm
That's what I'm
looking
thinking
at,
about,
because
yeah.
we're, what's today, the 17th of November,
Right,
and we're looking at this Thursday,
right.
and possibly again in December, or what's the time frame here? What are we looking at?
Well, you don't have another meeting until December 11th,
Right.
which then puts you into February 11th to get your report back, or get your comments back from the state. And now you're probably around the first meeting of March before you have a public hearing on it.
We're way past the deadline.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, you're starting to push it.
Right.
Even the 120 days, you're starting to push it,
Yeah,
unfortunately.
yeah,
Yeah.
I don't.
I could do this tomorrow.
I was hoping that this meeting would be where we address the.
Right, we're just running
I
out
know.
of time.
Well, why don't each person send their comments in, and then we have a placeholder Thursday night on this. Would you be able to cobble something together
We accept comments up till midnight, so.
tonight?
Sure.
Okay.
Tonight, tomorrow night, Wednesday
All right.
night.
Yeah, I mean, 'cause
Yeah, just-
I think we all need to be sensitive to the time frame of,
Yeah.
not pushing it, but by the same token, not a whole lot's happened since our last housing element. So, and yeah, we do want it to be good, but by the same token, it's not really set in stone, I don't think, with the funds and stuff like that. But what you're asking for is more flexibility, is what you're asking for.
Yeah, I think
And I think
exactly.
that's something, yeah.
Exactly.
If you just list those out, and then I'm sure the staff
Yeah.
can do a quick review of those.
Yeah, so if we could do that, if everybody, and then, by tomorrow, hopefully, can send whatever you have here. It's a little extra work, but it's a lot more extra work for staff, and then we can have a nice discussion about it Thursday. Hopefully, we can get through the rest of the agenda. It looks pretty light, but
I mean, some of you probably can't do it by tomorrow, so I mean, tomorrow night, Wednesday morning. That's
yeah, you know what I mean. Yeah. Okay, so, any other concerns before we adjourn?
Can I ask that on our Thursday meeting that this little spreadsheet that we have actually shows housing making us more money than businesses? And I've always heard the opposite. that
Yeah, well,
Housing,
can I just spend a minute on that? Because I think that, it's one of those issues that in the composite, yes, housing doesn't pencil out. It costs you don't get as much taxes and revenues out of housing as it costs to provide services in a city. The issue here in this configuration, or any configuration you're going to do in this area, it's classic infill development. So you're not building a new fire station. You already got your streets and your water and your sewer already there. Your park is there. You have maybe some incremental police costs because you have more people living in your community. You may have some demands on your recreation services and stuff of that nature. But it is really, you know, once you've already got a community, infill development makes a lot of sense. And from a financial standpoint, that's why when, you know, it's a totally different issue, but you look at the Baylands and you start thinking about building housing out there, notwithstanding all the other issues with that, you know, it becomes a real issue because it's, you don't have any of your services out there. And quite frankly, you know, you take a look at a city like San Jose and all the problems they have, it's because they've spread out from here to Kingdom Come, whereas San Francisco has just gone up. So I don't think San Francisco's probably had to add a fire station in, you know.
Since 1906.
I mean, you know, they don't have to do those kinds of things. They're already kind of built out that way. Whereas at San Jose, they keep building out, and they got new fire stations they got to put in, and parks, and police substations, and all the infrastructure. And it's no wonder they've had the problems they have.
Well, thank you. I was just hoping to get a little better explanation on Thursday night. but Thank you for.
It's one of those things you got to, you know, it's depending on how you're asking the question, you know, but if you delve right down to it, this kind of development is relatively inexpensive for a city.
And then another question on a point of our questions. Do they need to be funneled through staff before they come back to us so that we don't violate?
Yeah, if you just send them in to me, and then we'll do a composite, like you and Lori did on your questions and stuff. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, and I just wanted to say one thing that was mentioned on our proposed agenda, but not discussed yet, was about, I had suggested adding in a discussion of putting housing in the back of Crocker Park. That was suggested by Mitch Ball from the Chamber to consider. And, you know, he had thought that it would be close to, you know, adjacent to the Northeast Ridge, and that potentially businesses could relocate from there to the quarry if that was ever developed for commercial. But the more I think about it, you know, I'm not sure, you know, that's why I didn't really bring it up, that I don't think it's like a first choice for housing because it's so far from the core of Brisbane and all the transit, the shopping, and it's near the ridge, but it's, you know, it's only, the only plus is that it's near that residential development, plus it may be digging into the, you know, existing tax base of Crocker, which I know is a concern of Ray's. So just wanted to put that out there. I know we didn't discuss it because I sort of already had the discussion in my head. And just, you know, didn't think it made as much sense as what was already on the table. So that's it.
Ready to wrap it up?
Okay.
That's a wrap.
Meeting adjourned.